All right, so starting on page 11 here, we're going to go in and start building the sample report that we have on page 6 of your handout. So we have determined, the first thing we have to do is we have to tell it what records that we want to pull into this design. And we told our sample here on page 6 that we want the vendor and the invoice. This is an AP report. So to get started, we're going to go in under File, New Design at the top. The first thing it prompts us for is to select those records. So we're going to pick Invoice. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to pick Vendor. And you see, like the sample in the book at the top of page 11, it selects those records for us over here on the records selected. If I made a mistake and I pulled something over here, I can unselect it just by clicking back on it. Now, one thing to point out, once you select your records and you click OK, those records are locked into this design. At that point, you cannot remove records that you've selected for a design. So if you pulled something in that you really don't need and you don't know it until you get the report fully designed, you have to run the report with that record available because you can't remove it. This is the only place where you can correct yourself, is right at the very beginning. Because once I say OK here, it's pulled that record in, and if you see, you'll see on the far right-hand side of your screen, it's given me a field list of all the fields within the record, the driving record, which is selected as AP invoice. That's at the very top of that field list. It's picked the record that has the most detail to be the driving record. And then what you see here on the left in this big, huge area, this is broken down into multiple parts. Okay, so you have a thick gray line here going across. This is what is separating the header. Everything above that thick gray line is the header. Everything below it is the body of the report. Now, up here in the header area, you'll see that you've got the company name has pulled in, a default title has pulled in, and it's going to do page numbers for us. And then you'll see here that there is a pink line here, and it's got a triangle in the corner. So everything underneath the company name and title of the report, between that and the pink line, anything that we put in that area is going to print. And we can drag this section down, so if we have a bunch of stuff we want to print up here in the header, we can put that in. We can put text in here, we can pull fields in here, and when we run the report, that information will print at the top of each page. Anything that you put below the pink line will not print when you print the report. So you might put notes in here about, what information is printing up at the tops, so that when you open this design back up in RD, you'll see that text displayed. But whatever's in here, keep in mind, this will not print on the report. All right, now everything down below here, again, is the body. Now I can move this up. I'm going to move this back up here. And then I can also move this gray area up. So I'm going to move it up. And then I can click my cursor back down here in the body just to make it just a little bit easier to read. All right, so in the body, this is where we're going to pull all the fields that we need going across the page to print this report. Before we start doing that, I want to talk to you about the view. All right, so we've got the view up here. We've got the, again, the field list. This is what's printing or displayed to us over here on the side. The header, we talked about this. This is on page 12 in your handout. The body this big area here, and then footer. If I check that, it brings in the footer area. And so anything that we type in down here, again, is going to print on the report. If we need to put text in here, sorry, I pulled this down. I'm sorry, above the pink line again, up in here, this is going to print. Below the pink line for notes. Now the default is for this area not to come up. Most people do not put anything in the footer. So if you've got the footer coming up, you might take that off. That'll give you more room to build your report. Now also back here on the header, if we go to File, Page Setup, and this is at the bottom of page 12, Page Headings. This is where we can control the information up here. So it's defaulted to use the heading. It's defaulted to use the system defaults, which are the fields here that are grayed out. So it'll pull system date, time, and all of that because we've checked it. That's why this is grayed. If I uncheck this, that opens up these fields, and I can actually pull those in if I want. I can check mark them. I can also fix my title here. Call this okay. And it pulled that darn record security in here. I'm going to turn that off. It pulled the default formats for me. So I can when I this, watch what happens up here. Okay, so it pulled in my the new title that I gave it. Okay, and again, at the top of page 13, I've got some descriptions for those fields when you go to the page heading area again underneath File, Page Setup, Page Headings. All right, so now we're ready to start building our report. So I'm going to put my cursor back over here on the edge because that's where I want it to start, where I'm going to start pulling information in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull in I'm going to start with the vendor information. I've told it I want the vendor ID and the vendor name. So I'm going to double click on vendor, and you see that it pulls in here to the design. So this is different than Crystal. You're not dragging and dropping. You're highlighting the field that you want in the body of the report, and you're double clicking on it over here in this field list. So there's no drag and drop, and there's no typing of the field name itself. You have to double click to select it off of the field list. Now, the other thing I want is the vendor name. So to get to the vendor name, notice here I'm on the AP invoice. I want to get the name, which is over on the vendor record. So I'm going to click the index button here at the bottom, and I'm going to switch fields over here to the AP vendor. And I can highlight it and double click it, or I can highlight it and just click OK. And that brings me into the vendor record, where I can now highlight the vendor name and double click, and it pulls it in. All right, so now I'm going to come back a little bit later and bring in the address and the city-state zip information because I want to show you how to move stuff around, and that's a good example of that. So now I want to bring in the columns, the rest of the columns going across the page. I am going to maybe indent this a little bit, or maybe not, but I don't want it on the same line. I'm going to want the vendor ID and the vendor name to sort of print as an overlying type situation. So I might even come back over here and indent the invoice stuff in a little bit. So I'm putting my cursor where I want that first field to go, and I'm going to click my index button again, and I'm going to go back to the AP invoice. See here, I've changed my record, and I'm going to double click on the invoice number, and that pulls it in with the heading. Then I want to see the description, so I highlight the description field again, double click, that pulls it in. Then I want the amount, so I'm going to double click, and that brings it in. And then I want the amount paid. Okay, so I'm going to double click to pull that in. Now, because of all the years that I've been doing this, I have an idea where all these records are located on these lists. For those of you that are new and you know the title of that field, instead of having to scroll up and down and search for it, down here at the bottom, you can actually change the order of this display and put it in alphabetical order, and then you can maybe more quickly find the fields that you're looking for.